Hello, and welcome to the iModernize podcast, technology news, views, and insight for businesses on the IBMI platform. I'm your host, Amanda Blackburn, and I'm the Director of Marketing at Profound Logic Software. And today I'm joined by Rad Dockery, Senior Innovation Consultant at Profound Logic. Rad, welcome to the iModernize podcast.
Hello, Amanda. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. How are you holding up during the quarantine?
I can't complain. We're healthy. We're able to pay our bills. Homeschooling was hard though. Other than that, everything's been great.
That's what I hear. That's what I hear.
Yeah.
Well, and you're up in Canada, correct?
Yes, yes. In the Toronto area.
Nice. So tell us a little bit more about your role at Profound Logic.
Um, well, what I do at Profound, I work primarily with our sales teams, and I focus primarily on the financial services sector. Primarily, a little bit of supply chain as well, but primarily I spend my time with financial services and banking, insurance, wealth management, and working with them as they look to modernize, innovate, and transform their businesses to reflect the new realities of the marketplace. Pre-COVID, and of course, even more so now in post-COVID world. And I work primarily with these institutions who run IBMI as their core system or the main system within their IT environment.
Yep. That is definitely an important sector to focus on, and definitely one that we hear from in the IBMI community, as you know, having IBMI as the cornerstone of their business systems.
Mhm.
Um, so you've recently written a blog post on the topic of digital transformation in the financial services sector for these businesses on IBMI. You kind of touched on it, but why do you feel like this is a very important topic right now?
I think the topic's even more important now. I think number one, obviously in the post-COVID world, we saw access to cash become a critical issue and credit, whether it be for small businesses, large businesses, or consumers. The ability to get access to money, access to credit, when you need it, how you need it, immediately. So definitely when we saw the shutdowns happen globally, the first concern was what about families? How are families going to survive? How are they going to pay
Yeah.
their bills? How can we get money out to businesses so they can keep people employed? And of course,
Yeah.
the core of that's the banking system. Our banking system is built to address these needs, but of course, the banks themselves were also worried. Depending on the size of bank in particular, there's a great amount of concern. Capitalization, what's the risk you're going to take on? Can I afford to give these loans out? Can I defer customers? So the whole need of the banks and needing the banking sector needing to be mobile and flexible in this type of environment is critical. And even before then, even before COVID hit, there was the concern again about the change in banking, the change in how you want to access your money, and the change in what we want as consumers or as businesses to interact with the bank. And then how do banks maintain all of this, innovation and cool stuff they want to do and stay secure?
Mhm. Yeah.
Because I remember at a conference, a cyber security specialist once said, people always ask, no, why do people want to hack the banks? And she said, because that's where the money is, right?
Right.
Right. So the banking sector has to deal with, this is what they've always been and how they're going to be more flexible. And whether it be the largest banks or whether it be the very small community bank, a lot of the challenges are still the same.
Yeah. Definitely. And you touched on a couple of topics there, getting access to money, to finances from multiple different, devices, channels. I believe that's called omni-channel in the financial
Hmm.
industry. And also, the impact that COVID is having, on individuals, but also on businesses. And so I'm just kind of curious, for businesses that are, financial businesses that are specifically on the IBMI platform, how are their, I mean, to take a step back, because, just a little color commentary here, what keeps us in business at Profound Logic is businesses that have been on the IBMI way back when it was AS400 or I
Yes.
series.
Hmm.
Now they're on IBMI. because that's the latest iteration of the server, which itself is very modern, but their applications and the business systems that they've created on top of that platform um, may not be up to the standards of what we would expect a modern
Hmm.
business to have.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that goes beyond the interface, right? Beyond just the GUI green screen. So I think my question to you would be, taking all of this into consideration with COVID and, the new pressures that are being put on businesses, what do you think the biggest challenges are because of these legacy applications and legacy systems?
And
I know it's a big question, right?
it, it's a very big question. I think the answer to that, to give a bit of a history of the banking sector, financial sector itself,
Mhm.
especially in North America. And this applies worldwide. And as some of our listeners may or may not know, we do business around the world, in Asia and Europe as well. And the banking system when you think about, or the financial services system, was the modern system we look at today in general was really built in the 50s and 60s. That's when we really saw when computers became more mainstream for large companies. The IBM mainframe, or the beginning of what was the IBM mainframe. And an analogy I heard from a venture capitalist in the fintech sector, he once said that think about banking as an airport. So an airport, that was built maybe 67 years ago, had a runway, and I call maybe could hold 3 or 4 planes. Now the airport's expanded today to have maybe 45 runways into larger airports, but the baseline of those runways are still there. There's no airport in the world going to say, well, I want to make my airport fancier and rip out 45 runways that they built in 1962. They're going to modernize those runways. They're going to put new technology on those runways. They're going to put new pavement on those runways, but they'll never tear it out. That's the banking system. The banking system was built a particular way. And the problem and the challenge becomes that it was built before this whole idea of, Rad could send the man the money from his phone. No one saw that in the 1960s. No one saw that in 1990. No one
Oh
saw that
yeah,
in 1990. No one saw that in 2000. A lot of
that
people
is
weren't even using.
accurate.
A lot of people weren't even using this 10 years ago or 5 years ago, right?
I mean,
So
it blew us away when you could start taking pictures of your checks, and that would just immediately go into your bank, right?
yeah, and there's still people who still don't get it. I get a check and take a picture and goes into
Hmm.
my bank account. There's still a lot of people who still can't get their head around that today. So we never saw these things coming. Now, so I mentioned the IBM mainframe, but of course, for increasing amount of mid-sized banks or even large banks with departments, they needed a server that had the same security, reliability of a mainframe, but of course didn't want to invest into a mainframe for that division or that bank. So this is where IBMI, which is called System 3638, came about. And then when it came to the AS400, it really grew in that era because banks are now buying packages with the servers that could handle all their needs in one scoop: their application, their security, the infrastructure, everything,
Hmm.
database, everything you need all in one. And it's worked fine. And to your point, they've upgraded a lot of the infrastructure hardware wise, and they continue to do so because the IBM Power chips are, they are supreme performance tools. They're phenomenal. And that's not the problem. The problem becomes that the actual applications themselves were actually built for the world before a mobile phone, before you could do things with Facebook and AI and Twitter, before you could take pictures of your check or use your phone as a debit card at a store. That's the
Right.
issue. So these systems were not built for that, but yet the world, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, has exploded that way. And that's the challenge for a lot of men. That's the core problem. How do I have this multiple, maybe in some cases, decades of my
Mm.
logic, my business, my applications, my data flow within this IBMI that works great. At the same time, I have to compete with a large bank coming into my market, or I got to compete with other banks who are competing, or maybe a new fintech coming out of the corner who can now capture market share. So how do I capture more of my customer market share and grow while holding my costs down? And that's the challenge for many IBMI customers now today.
Yeah. And you mentioned fintech, which is, the market for tools and solutions to help address not just, legacy modernization, but also, all of the newest, latest, blockchain and, we talked about the omni-channel experience and near field communications and those types of technologies. But like you mentioned, businesses that are running on IBMI or have that as the core of their business may not even be ready for that yet. So what would you say the options are, the best options are? Well, not even the best options, just what are all the options available that you can think of for businesses, that are facing this right now?
Well, the option one that I've seen from clients, the first option that comes on the table is, do I come off this platform? That's the first option they all bring up, especially if a new senior executive comes on board who's not familiar with the platform at all. Especially if you're looking at whether it be a large bank, medium bank, or smaller bank, where maybe somebody comes from more of the open systems world. And they come in and they say,
Hmm.
what's IBMI? What are you talking about? They have no idea what RPG is,
Right,
right? They think
right.
RPG is a new. They think RPG is a missile used in the military. They have no idea what RPG is, right?
Or a role
So,
playing game.
right, exactly, right. So they come in and they think, okay, what is this thing? So the first thought is, I gotta get off of it, right? We gotta get off. And then, of course,
Yeah.
somebody reminds them in a department somewhere saying, well, that's great. And we're going to move over thousands of processes and rewrite everything. That's going to take us years to do that. And while we're doing that, the other bank's getting customers. So that option gets pushed away or it's pushed off far in the horizon because they know it's not possible. Um, the next option then becomes, okay, how do I create interfaces to build that type of experience? And this option here is the one that most customers look at, but it's also the most complex. And so you need a partner like Profound who can work beside you because this is just not a technology issue. So the tech is the part we all look at. Obviously, if I'm running this IBM system, I got all my processes there, but it's also about what are you trying to become? Where are you trying to go? So one of the first steps we normally see, one of the mistakes we often see is that a institution will say, no, I want to start doing more advanced mobile solutions with my clients. That's great. But it'll be a mobile team who develops mobile apps on Microsoft platforms or other platforms and never speak to the IBMI team internally, never. And then they develop some nice, cool apps and some of the stuff they could do, but the core banking, what I want to do, or core insurance or core stock trading I want to do, it never happens. And it never happens because the two divisions within a company never work together ever.
Yeah,
Um, so,
that's
so, the,
interesting.
so one of the key things on option that has to be option one, no matter what you want to do, is align your teams together to be on the same page. And that starts at the leadership level. And it also starts with finding partners who are looking at you from a complete holistic point of view. As one of the advantages that I think we bring to the table. It's one thing to say to your mention before, a green screen. Okay, so maybe I want my screen to look more modern. That's fine. We definitely can help you with that. But why? What's the impact of this? And who are the stakeholders who will benefit? Are they involved in this? And then how do we move it to say, if I do a green screen modernization, okay, that's great and fine. But what's the end game here? What are we trying to do? How's it going to impact our profit and loss? How's it going to reduce our risk profile? How's it going to make employees more productive? And that's the kind of, and what's your roadmap to do this? How do we put it together on a roadmap that's a measurable, definable way? And that's the option that's critical. And that, to me, is not even an option, it's a must. But yet part of the problem is that for a lot of our IBMI clients out here today is that they don't know these options exist. Instead, they're throwing tools at the problem where tools are only part of the solution. What's really part of the solution is having a partner such as Profound who understands the complete holistic view of what you're trying to do and understands the business requirements, the technical requirements, and a requirement is often forgotten, cultural requirement. Because for a
Hmm.
lot of organizations, if you have a team that's been programming in IBMI for a long time, and we're talking about new applications, new kind of services, and so now all of a sudden, your RPG programmer has to know how to speak to a marketing director in English,
Yeah, yeah.
and vice
It is
versa.
cultural. Yeah, it is cultural, and we see that in businesses in almost every industry that we work with.
Yeah, and especially banking, because banking is known to be one of the most conservative industries out there, right?
Hmm.
So when you picture the stereotype of a banker is they're all wearing their $900 suits, right, and etc. But in reality, a lot of banks, when you go down, to the data centers, etc., these are no people just like me and you, but the stereotypes that are very conservative, and particularly insurance. Insurance is
Hmm.
known to be a very conservative industry. So you're also dealing with that. So one key thing is that you develop this kind of idea where you want to go and list a series of options is what could be a quick win for internally that the team could rally around. What could be a quick win, a quick project that we could deliver on? So let's say if your goal is want to be able to deliver an array of new mobile services down in the future, or to do amazing things with artificial intelligence, great. But what could be the first two or three wins we're looking for that are successful projects, successful initiatives that we could run with? So it
Hmm.
might be green screen that connects, the argument a green screen project that connects a mortgage broker to your bank quicker and faster. It could be something simple as that, right? And maybe we're just going to take a couple of brokers and run a test with them, but success. And I think that's when you start to see where, wow, if the IBMI, if we look at a company like Profound and IBMI, and we could do this at a small scale, how can we scale this up? Um,
Hmm.
so, so a big part of that is trying to define what a quick win looks like. But one of the big problems with digital transformation as a catchphrase, it sounds so big. But the key is
Yeah.
to have to slice it all up into smaller pieces and say, okay, great, these are two small pieces. We have a win. And that's the key, I think, in IB, because that gets the IBMI or the legacy people happy. That has the new cool AI people happy, and has executives in the middle happy. Everyone could find a win. Everyone wins together. And I think that's the real critical part, especially in today's world, we have to focus on with clients.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, the conservatism within, the attitude of being a little bit more conservative, a little bit more guarded, within, this sector, and it makes sense, right? Because security is number one. You have to make sure that you're safeguarding the data, and making sure that your applications, and your systems live up to that. And so making changes to those systems, can be a very scary prospect. But at the same time, it seems like, not only making changes could be very scary, but you're also being faced with, we have this outdated looking application, we have aging code, we have developers that are getting ready to leave. I mean, that's also, if you think about it, kind of a
Mm-hmm.
security risk as well.
For sure, I mean, that's a very serious security risk. And banks, when you read a lot of the financial statements, and those who are in the banking sector have to tell you this, it's risk, 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 risk. You hear
Hmm.
often when CEOs are speaking on TV on CNBC, it's about our risk profile, especially on the credit side. And that makes sense. That's why IBMI in the first place has done so well in the sector because of its security. But what's key for any client to realize is that you still could innovate without having to do massive customization. And that's the benefit of working with organizations such as us who understand the holistic picture, the full picture. So if we want to modernize that green screen, we can help you work on that as a quick win, but also realize we're not telling you to rip out all your source code. Well, we're not saying replace the source code or move off the IBMI platform. We're telling you to stay on it because it's secure. But we can
Yeah.
innovate out of a very secure, robust, scalable environment that runs on IBM Power. That combination makes you a powerhouse. That combination makes you be able to innovate quickly. Even more importantly, you'll find from speaking to myself, speaking from banks around the world, they want to be able to fail quickly. They want to be able to create or try new things quicker and faster. And if you fail, fine, but you can say you're innovating internally, you're pushing it. And this is without having to bother your source code, without having to say, now we need a team of 95 people to reprogram our database. You don't have to do that anymore. So that's the advantage that we bring. And I think if you look at any organization in the bank and financial services sector on IBMI, the number one concern is, okay, how much custom work I got to do on my base code again? It's a concern. Um, we basically reduce that concern significantly by addressing those
Hmm.
needs. Innovate within the secure environment. Don't come off of it or risk the fact that you could get hacked. To your point, this is data and it's people's money. It's why people
Yeah.
work. So that's why the
Yeah.
banks have to be conservative. You could innovate within the environment. And there are clear examples of banks and financial institutions around the world who are starting to do some pretty cool things while maintaining security integrity. And I think and that is absolutely critical. And this is where for IBMI, that battle that could happen internally is well, we're secure. We don't want to innovate too much. It's not an and or anymore. The two work hand in hand.
Right. Well, you actually just had a recent big win, helping a business in this sector, uh, that was leveraging the IBMI platform, for their applications. Can you tell us a little, without going into too much, detail, because I know it's a little private, but tell us a little
Yes.
bit more about what that entailed.
Yep. So this was an overseas bank, and the bank's a fairly well-known bank overseas for the local market, and they serve a fairly large population. And they run their core banking system on IBMI, and they've been running on IBMI for the last 15 to 20 years, and they're very happy with it. Uh, Here's the main concern, a couple of concerns that they brought up to me as we engaged. Concern number one was that 55 to 60% of their population is under 30 years old. And the need for them to offer banking services or partnerships to, through other retailers or other, cool spots within the country became critical. Because if young people are not engaged in that 60% of your market's just going to get eaten up. And they weren't able to create or test new services fast enough to engage this market. And the reason why they couldn't, because their core banking system was built, again, very robust, excellent platform. But for them to innovate off that platform, they depend too much on the vendor. And what that meant was, let's say I wanted to create a new mobile service for how, if you go to a particular retailer, I could offer you 10% off right at the retailer if you use my debit card, something like that. Well, for them to even test that, they had to wait up to 8 to 12 weeks for the vendor to get back to them to even look at the problem. And then normally they were charged an additional fee, or the fee was bundled into their support contract and they add on more hours to the support contract. Now you can imagine if I'm trying to figure out how to make offers for when you go to a store and you get an offer on demand, and I'm trying to create that, I gotta wait 7, 8 weeks. By the time I figure that out, my competitor's probably done that 10 times over already, and you lose market
Hmm.
share. So they
Yeah.
said to us, we want to find a way to leverage the data out of the core banking system without having to wait 7, 8 weeks. Can we create almost our own like development garage internally where we could try new ideas in the lab and create an array of potential web services that could make it easier for external partners and internal partners to work with us and internal teams. So we went on to a proof of concept with them that was fairly robust. Proof of concept was a very robust one, and because of the size of their customer base, we had to test one of our products on Profound.js in their environment. And we were able to create web services that could be executed at about 2,000 transactions a second, which was absolutely incredible. We were able to
That's
win
great.
the deal. We were able to win. We won. And our competition was really them trying to do it themselves. They looked at some of our traditional competitors, but we won the deal. And we right now, I believe we just finished off our first set of web services developed for them. The first ever fully Node.js enabled web services this bank's ever seen off
That's
their
awesome.
IBMI. Actually, one as a side joke, during the proof of concept, one of the developers, when he first installed Profound.js and we were working with him, he actually built a little game honestly on IBMI to show the team, show
Oh,
his
no
technical
way.
team. Yeah, he showed his team that, hey guys, this stuff is cool. Look, I built a game. Right? Like it was like a little game, like a Space Invaders type of game. Two people, two a spaceship shooting at each
Oh, that's
other,
awesome.
right? But he was able to show them this, and they're like, "What's this on IBM?" I said, "How do you do that?" He said, "Easily, because I did Profound.js." And then he watched on our CEO Alex's video on how he used Profound.js to work with a Tesla. So he kind of used those same concepts for this little mini video game that he and three of the guys could play when they're bored. off the
That's
IBMI
amazing.
from now I'm not saying it's a core, that's not a killer application, but but I think about it, for a team that for many years was stuck in RPG, had no way out. Now they're able to do games, play games under IBMI.
Well, for
Like,
IBMI, that sounds like a killer app. That's, I mean, but that's a really good point though that you bring up is, it's a lot often when we think about, IBMI applications, 5250 applications, we think about those kind of being outdated, but at the same time, there are a lot of tools out there for quote unquote modernization that themselves are fairly outdated. And, one of the exciting things about tools like you mentioned, Profound JS, is because they are so new, they support development on IBMI. You can still use RPG if you want to, but you can also integrate in and convert to the Node.js code, which is so, awesome thinking about, future development and like you were talking about API and connecting the business.
yeah, that's exactly it. And I think that piece there what he did by building the game, it hits the culture piece, doesn't it? Because now everyone's kind of says, hold on, a little bit of edge is taken off internally. A little bit of edge is taken off because now you're saying, wow, this, no, we have all these screens, etc. We created something that's a little bit fun and cool, but no, even I said to him, I said, if you're interested about this though, everyone now sees that you can actually do something different on your IBMI, but look, you didn't alter your RPG source code. You didn't change your
Hmm.
database tables. We didn't ask you to deconstruct the server. You installed
Right.
it, got it up and running, able to create this. You create this little game within what, 25, 30 minutes? Now, what
Yeah.
if we could bring that kind of funness and innovation to do what the real core, such as your core banking transactions at the branch? What if now we could do some cool things such as how to work with your AI bot? So, one of the things they want to look at is, in this country, there are about 18 different ways to speak the language in business, their native language. And they're now looking at potentially, being able for a customer able to go on Twitter and, type out some things on Twitter, and then the AI bot will be able to go to the IBMI with the web services we built and be able to, execute transactions based on what I'm telling over Twitter.
Yeah.
No. So you look at something like that, right? The whole game concept, the person who saw the game concept was someone in marketing who then said, wow, can we not integrate some of the video game companies working here about, if you want to buy more packages, use our credit card? So that's
Yeah.
marketing who jumped into the meeting and got excited. And now, no, we got to teach. Now we got to teach these guys in IT how to speak to the marketing 22-year-old marketing gurus. We're like, I want to do cool marketing. But that's, if you're an executive at a bank or a shareholder, that's what you want to see. You want that kind of innovation, cross-team innovation. That's what you want to see.
Absolutely. And as somebody who is in marketing, I can just say that when you are able to break down those walls and have those communications across departments, because at the end of the day, when I think about how I use my bank, when I think about how I interact with it, there are so many different touch points. And if those touch points aren't all operating in the same way and the way that I expect and in a very modern way, I would not feel, I don't think, as comfortable, doing business with that bank because to me, I want somebody who is innovative and keeping up with the latest technologies. And so it's awesome to hear that, this was able to kind of bridge that gap between the two departments.
So that, your point's exactly it. There's an experience that we expect as consumers or businesses, and even more important than that, there are experiences that internal employees expect. So internal employees who've been working maybe at customer service in the credit card department, be using the same systems forever. They have multiple screens to execute to serve me on the phone, and they often say, "Oh, please hold, sir." Because why? Because one screen saying one thing, next screen saying another thing. They got 4 or 5 screens up trying to figure out how to deal with me.
Oh,
To
wow. Yeah.
my insurance companies like this. I sit down, I watch my insurance agent. She has 4, 5, 6 screens up. And I look at her and I say, wow, she's fantastic, but these screens are not fantastic. And she's
Hmm.
frustrated because she should be cross selling me or upselling me on additional products.
Yeah.
So she should be doing. She's spending more time just trying to figure out how to get my ads just trained changed properly. So you look at something like that, and when I saw the screen, I saw Salesforce, I saw a web application, I saw an IBM screen. I knew exactly what it was. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, if we worked with her, she'd probably have one screen to work off. That's a beautiful looking screen, and behind the scenes, everything would work seamlessly. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't even have to be here. And
Yeah.
right, I don't. Their coffee is good and they have good donuts. But other than that, I don't need to be there. I got things to do, man. And now
You don't like
in
to
a
just hang out in the insurance office talking to
oh
your
man.
agent?
Well, versus homeschooling a 7-year-old, it depends on the day of the week. If you ask me that, it depends.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
yeah. So you're looking at examples like that. If your employees are given better tools to be more productive, that means that a more productive employee means I'm probably have a better customer experience for me,
Yeah.
right? So that type of discussion point becomes critical. So no, in that case, we are now engaged in something early discussions with that institution right now, about how we perhaps we could help them. And again, how do I take that expertise? Because at the same time, that insurance company lost a couple of their really good insurance agents who are frustrated about how systems work. So
Yeah.
the job losses are just not coming with the retiring developers on the platform, are the people who have to interact with these systems every day. Eventually they get frustrated too. And then
Yeah.
they got to compete against a fintech or insurance tech who doesn't have all that legacy. Now the risk for those guys is that they don't have also as well the security and the power of an IBM power system either. So there's the risk. And we could play an important role bridging the two worlds together, bring the two worlds together. You could have something that's cool fintech that speaks to the business logic on the IBM and maintains integrity. And we provide that. So I think the employee part of this is also so critical. Frontline employees who deal with people like us every day, what are their frustrations? Or what would they
Hmm.
like to see? And see, that's part of the whole, in the beginning, what you talked about, an approach to go after this. That's kind of the bottom up and top down where they meet each other. And that's how you could
Yeah.
create a fantastic use case we could build off and show some real value to financial services clients and their customer base and their employees. Because without your employees, you're nothing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Well, Rad, we're coming up on the end of our time here. This has been a great conversation. Really learned a lot from you about, the importance of, having new modern application capabilities, within the financial sector. I think my last question for you would just be if you could time travel 20 years into the future, a
Mm-hmm.
time without COVID, hopefully. What would the ideal scenario be for the financial sector be? If you could have a crystal ball and look forward into the future, what would you
Oh,
like for
wow.
that to be? Yeah, small
Wow.
question.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll take a question from two angles. One angle would be if I'm an investor in one of these banks, because through our mutual funds or retirement plans, we invest in a lot of banks for most of us.
Uh,
I think from that point of view, first, I would want to see the banks become as efficient as possible in delivering services to customers and innovative. I'm not talking
yeah,
about far out crazy things. I'm talking about ways, what I mentioned what a bank overseas is trying to do, and some banks up here in Canada are doing with gas stations. Can you create offers on demand that bring me value while you still make
mhm,
money? So if I go to that gas station and I use this particular bank's credit card, I immediately get 3 cents a liter off of gas. Now I'm in Canada, we use liters, not gallons, sorry.
a little
But
different. Yeah.
right? So immediately I get a discount. That brings me benefit, right? And
Mhm.
I look at that and I say, okay, that's being a technology guy. I'm like, oh, I know what's going on behind the scenes, API, blah 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 blah. Average person doesn't care. They care about they save themselves money at the pump, right? And for the bank, that's good because that means I'm using the card more. And for the gas or company, it's good because I'm using their gas more. And if I'm going to go outside, I might buy a chocolate bar, et cetera, et cetera. So those type of win-wins, what are the next 3 or 4 or 5 things, services like that I could deliver value for everybody, right? I think that's the thing I could see 20 years out. How do we create a more automated process around that? And they say the number one thing banks are going to be looking at right now is AI. AI should be focused on that direction. How to create
Mhm.
value wins for everybody. So bank can make money, I save some money, everyone can make a bit of money, have some savings, and have a better, more cohesive experience to what you were talking about. I think the second part of that would be, 20 years from now, one of the key things we got to think about too is equality within banking and access to financial services for everybody. It's becoming a
Mm,
big issue worldwide, a big issue in America and in Canada as well. So 20 years from now, with these technologies that we could help on the digital transformation side, how do we make sure that people are not left behind? How do we make sure that the micro small business restaurant around the corner can get access to capital when they need it? How can we make sure these things are available within the banking sector without having to wait 3 hours on hold on the phone or going to 72 pages of paper? So what can we do within there with technology to do so? And in both scenarios, what's really great about IBMI is that it's so secure. So
yeah.
no matter what happens, it's so secure. It could scale. I showed you 2,000 transactions a second we could work with on the IBMI. We could scale. We could secure. So I think with 20 years from now, I would like to see more efficient delivery of partnership services and a way to make banking and finance more equitable for everybody. And if we could do
Mm,
that, then I think we could really see 20 years from now, that'd be phenomenal. And it's going to take some work. If change was easy, everyone would just do it. But
right.
at the same time, I think we could accomplish both. And I think that underlying technology of a secure platform like IBMI and with a partner like us who understand the technology, but also the business impact and the social impact, which has a business impact, we can really make a difference and make people's lives better. So we, God forbid, have any kind of similar type of pandemic or some kind of emergency, we're ready. I'll end with this. There's a joke going around some of my LinkedIn circles right now that says, the joke was, who was your chief digital transformation officer? And the first option was COVID-19. No, COVID-19 unfortunately has forced a lot of change. I
Sadly,
mean,
yes.
right? Unfortunately, we pray for the families who have suffered through this as well. At the same time, now we look at the business side of this now. Now's your chance. Now's the chance to deal with this. And I think you made a fantastic point. Look at the companies you're normally talking to. Have they modernized anything? Or they're just offering the same pitch, but they put COVID-19 on top of the brochure, right?
Yeah.
It's about the experience of all of this and how to move forward. So 20 years from now, let's be in a position that no matter what happens, we could help enable customers and customers be able to deliver, banks could deliver that service quickly and fast and transparently and securely. That's where we want to be 20 years from now.
Well, it's definitely pushed forward for a lot of businesses, pushing them, challenging them in directions that they haven't been pushed or challenged in before, and hopefully by the end of all of this, we'll all come out, stronger and healthier, whether it's people or businesses.
Yeah, let's hope so. And I think we will. Humans in general. I mean, the news is normally bad, but think about, we just talked about 20 years from now. 20 years ago, did we ever expect we'd be talking about what we could do today with technology? We never would have saw it. So 20 years from now, let's see what happens. But we could build the foundation for that right now, and
Yeah.
that's secure, accessible, and works for everybody.
Absolutely. Well, Rad, thanks again for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I hope you and your family stay well and safe, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
No, thank you, Amanda. Same to you and your family as well. Be safe.
Thank you. And for everybody out there listening, same to you. Stay safe, stay healthy. And, if you're looking for some ideas and solutions for modernizing your business, new services that can help you tackle some of these topics and issues that we talked about on this podcast, just make sure to subscribe on our blog. That's profoundlogic.com, and you can find our blog from there. Until next time, this is Amanda Blackburn from Profound Logic and the iModernize podcast, and we'll talk to you soon.